Hello and welcome back, and today I want to look at Plex Media Server performance on the brand new TS-653D. Now, a few things straight off the bat. I've already done a bunch of Plex Media Server test videos, and this is going to be very much like them, but there will be a few key differences. First and foremost, although I'm testing the TS-653D, these results largely apply to the 253D and the 453D as well. They've both got the same CPU as this in the J4125 quad-core processor, and the device supports DDR4 memory. On the subject of memory, it's worth highlighting that this device today will be utilizing 8 gig of memory. Normally, I try to keep things as vanilla as possible, but this device I'm using for certain other tests right now involving backups that I unfortunately can't power down the device and remove the memory. So it's worth highlighting that I can't remove the memory, but we shouldn't exceed 4 gig of memory anyway. But do keep a close eye down here at the memory monitor in case any of that comes out of hand. So do bear that in mind. Now, the other thing to bear in mind with today's video is I've done other Plex videos for some Synology devices where I factored in Video Station as well. And of course, the QNAP has its own video application as well. But I have a whole dedicated video to Video Station coming very, very soon. And rather than kind of divulge off the subject of Plex too much, which I know a few of you had a few bothers with in my previous Plex videos, I'm going to try and focus just on Plex in this video without using any of the other tools, because showing you guys the other tools and that the native tools play back some files better than Plex isn't answering your questions. If anything, it's making you more confused. So I'm going to stick with just Plex today without looking at any other apps. And finally, with regard to this test, we are using the same test files that we've used before. We're using the 720p H.264, a 1080p H.264 at different megabits per second, and then we're going to go into some of those jellyfish tests. And for those of you who didn't catch my disclaimer on another video, the reason we're using these is one, the 1080p and 720p file are fairly representative of most standard video files that people have in their old library, and the jellyfish files are the ones that we're utilizing from Jellyfish's own test website. Recommend you check them out. I'll bring it there to the top. And all of these files are 30 seconds long, but range all the way from 10 megabytes to all the way up to 1.4 gigabytes for 30 seconds of footage. The reason we're using it is so we've got the same file type being utilized in every test. We can't run different videos for these tests. This is the only way I could find one video that covered all of the different formats of different megabits per second, 10-bit and 8-bit files, and MKV, H.264, 265, and 4K and 1080p. So with all those disclaimers out of the way, let's get straight into it. At the top here, we've got the bandwidth. This shows you the network activity of the NAS. Do bear that in mind, because this is going to be telling you about what's happening and what files are being accessed, and if the device has network activity, which you can see it does. Next, CPU and memory. You can see down here that with the CPU and the memory, the amount of utilization is broken down into Plex and the NAS system itself. Right, so the first file we're going to be going with is the 720p H.264 version of the Matrix. H.264, 720p, representative of a lot of the old movies you might have knocking around, and the fact that I'm calling the Matrix an old movie breaks my heart. We're going to go ahead, we're going to play that film from the beginning. We're going to go ahead and start playing it. We're going to notice a little bit of utilization here in the background. I had to stop recording there for a second, but we've come back now. We've got the overview there, giving us real-time information about just how much memory Plex is utilizing there. So at the moment, it's 228.5 megabytes. I've had to zoom things out a little bit here, which I know is super annoying, but it's the only way to make sure everything's in screen. So I hope you can make that out. If we carry on, we can have a little look down. Move that up there. And we can see that it is doing quite well to play back this file. We can flick around pretty easily. And again, this is within Plex. This isn't using HDMI or a local thing. We are still streaming this file. So let's start doing some transcoding. So now let's move this 720p file. First, we're going to scale it up. So we're going to scale it up to 4 megabits per second. So again, no real change there. There'll be a tiny spike. You can see the network activity jumping around as I flick between the different parts of the movie while it's loading up different packets of data. Now we can scale down, and we'll scale down to 720p 2 megabits per second. So it's scaled up the megabits per second just to 2. Now we'll go down to 480p. And again, 480p, we'll have a look. We can still flick around at 480p. Still seemingly doing a bang up job there. Still quite impressed with it. And we can see that memory utilization by Plex is still sitting at around 200 megabytes per second, sorry. So now we're going to scale down, and this is where we're going to start to see problems. But we've scaled down to 328p. We're already starting to see pretty intense pixelation there. And at the same time, if I grab a mobile phone that I've got available here, then I'm going to load up Plex Media Server. I'm going to play back the exact file. So let's bring that up there. We're watching Plex. So let's bring that up on there. Scroll down. Find Plex. And find the movie. Sorry for the delay there, folks. Got to set it up for the first time. And as you can see, we're now watching the movie here on the mobile phone simultaneously. 2 streams happening at once on these 2 devices. So now let's go even lower. This is where we're really going to start to see problems. Transcoding this 720p file down this low is probably going to be problematic. It's still playing here on the mobile device, but we're not really seeing it. We're seeing the spikes of the mobile as I flick between the different segments of the film, but I do think scaling down to 240p there is just a little bit too much for this to handle. So let's come out of that file. We'll come out of the mobile phone transcode as well. Come out of there. And now we'll move on to a 1080p file. Now the 1080p file we're going through, just like before, is a little shop of horrors. It's H.264 1080p, and the file itself I believe is around 1.6, 1.8 gigabytes. So we're going to go ahead and play back this file. We're going to open up there, and we're going to see how well this plays the file. But at the moment we're already seeing the tiniest fraction of a delay there, which isn't what I would have expected. So let's go back and double check that we're indeed playing the right file. So let's minimize there. We're still on the 53D. We're playing our movie there. Let's resize and bring that movie back. We're seeing buffering, but it took a little longer than I would have liked to play that file. I'm surprised it took as long as it did. Now let's skip around and take a look at the rest of the film. Seeing the tiniest of a pause there as we flick between the scenes, but it's still playing back the file pretty well, and we are seeing less than a second of click there between them. It's playing back the file. There's no transcoding going on. Once again, we'll bring that back. We're playing at its original format. So let's go up. This time we'll scale upwards to a 20 megabits per second file, and we'll leave that to play. Now, in my other videos, I don't know if you guys have heard me talk about this in my other Plex videos, this business of the Plex driver. I'm going to keep it very light right now, but long story short, the latest version of Plex utilizes a driver that isn't really ideal for H.265 transcoding. Consequently, moving forward from this, we're almost certainly going to be seeing little blips with regards to transcoding H.265 files. Now, this is not to do with the QNAP NAS system. Indeed, it's nothing to do with Synology QNAP or any of the new NAS platforms that utilize this newer generation CPU. This is about Plex using a driver that it is choosing to use rather than the system default. There's one that the likes of Video Station on QNAP and Video Station on Synology can take advantage of. Now, there is workarounds using back-end access with SHH, but again, as mentioned, I'm not going to focus too much. We want to go for as much of a vanilla setup as possible. But I just wanted to touch on that, and I do have a video coming very soon talking about how to amend that. But I want to get all of vanilla Plex transcoding videos on these units done before we move on to that. But now we're going to go transcode down to 720p, and we're going to take a good look there at the video file playing there. And again, we can flick around, and if anything, it's playing back even better than it did before. Now, It's worth highlighting you can do offline transcoding on the QNAP, but most of you aren't really going to do that with Plex because you want to watch stuff on a whim. So there it's 720. Now we'll go down to 480. And we'll go with the 480p. And as mentioned, this is where we're going to start to see these problems of these files playing. We're going to see blips. We're going to see, ultimately, the system struggle to play some of these files. This isn't really related to the hardware. This is to do with that Plex system. And I do recommend you check out my my video station for QNAP video coming hopefully in the next 3 days if I get it all sorted in time. Now, one of the things to also highlight, you may see CPU and memory utilization leap up here, but we're not seeing any bandwidth. That means that the system is trying to work on the file. It just can't resolve and it's not pushing out the file. So as you see, that's why we're seeing the spikes there, but not at the top. And memory utilization is slowly creeping up. We can see CPU utilization and memory at the top there, but I think we may have to give up the ghost on this file. We can try and go lower to 382p, but I really can't see this resolving anyway anytime soon. However, if we flick back to the original, plays back in a heartbeat. And there we go. As we see, we're seeing the playback reverting just to the way it was, and buffering is keeping up the whole time. If we move outside the buffer zone, boom, done. We can flick around nice and easy, and it's playing back that file. So let's exit this, and now let's move on to the more intense series of videos where we want to talk about the jellyfish stuff, where these are files. Let's make sure we stay within the right NAS, the 653D, sorry. And now we're going to test those bigger files. Now, as you see, we have a varied selection of files here on screen. I know it's quite small. I've probably squished this part of the screen into the bottom left corner, but this part has got 3 megabit, 10 megabit, 30 megabit, 100 megabit, 120, 200, and 400 megabit files. These are covering 1080p, 4K, 4K UHD, and to H.264 and 265, as well as some 10-bit ones in between. I'm not going to play them all, but I'm going to use this to kind of alliterate a point I made earlier. Now, say we go for a 3 megabit H.264. In theory, this should play with no problems. As you see, it played immediately. This is a 30-second file, so the reason that's important is it's good to look at the buffering. I don't know how well you can make that out on screen, but right now playback is there, but at the end, buffering's already completed. Buffering far outweighs playback on this file that's around 10 megabytes in size. As you see, it's that file there we're playing. It played it well, and it's played it with relative ease. Now, if we move back, this time we'll conduct a transcode during this 30-second recording. I hit the wrong button. Let's go back to it. Let's play. Oh, go there, play back there, rewind back, and we will go with a transcode down to 720p. Transcode down, 720p. And as we can see, we're starting to see that transcode bother again, and it has kicked us out there. Now, if we move back, we can look at the H.265 version, and this is really a lot to do with Plex on this system. Now, again, nothing to do with the QNAP per se, it's about the Plex installer app that they are working on resolving. So as you see, there's pixelation there with the H.265 file, even though it is near enough identical to the so we're looking at the H.265 version, not even the 10-bit version, but this is the version we're trying to play now. And again, the difference between it and the 264, if anything, it's smaller because H.265 is a much better, more expressive codec and better for systems. But in terms of video playback, we are noticing this problem. Now, if we look at the 10-bit version, it will play back, but again, we're probably going to see that pixelation that we just talked about. Whereas, if you have a look, we're going to play back this file, and it really is struggling to play back this H.265 10-bit file. Even though, and if we have a look, it will go straight into a conversion. It can't even play the original. You won't even have the option to play the original file. All you can do is transcode it. If you try to transcode it down to 720p, you can have a look there, but buffering is just not going to outdo the file. Now the reason that kicked us out is twofold. One, the system was having difficulty with the transcode, but more importantly, it's about how big the file is. This is only 30 seconds, but remember, of the files you're seeing on screen, it's 30 seconds for this 10 megabyte file and 30 seconds down here for 1.4 gigabytes of file. So you have to bear that in mind. Now, if we have a look, we bring the resource monitor up. If we just concentrate on the H.264 files, remember the H.264 files get progressively bigger. So that file, that file, that file, that file, that one, and that one. Let's have a look at these files, all of which get progressively bigger. Now what you'll notice in theory is the majority, if not all, of the 1080p files are going to play like a dream. They're going to play straight away, no problems at all. CPU and memory utilization is pretty low, so now we've done 10 meg, let's go to the 30 megabits, sorry. And there you go, playing like a charm. Even buffering is completed remarkably quickly there at the bottom. And again, this is playing the original file type with relative ease. So if we come out there, let's go back to that 10 meg file there just to double check and prove that we were indeed playing that file in its original format there. As you see, 10 megabits per second, H.264 1080p. We'll come out of there. We'll go even higher. We'll go to 30. So we've done 30. We'll do 100 megabits. And this is where we might start to see a little bit of struggle, but not much, because it will be able to play this 100 megabits 1080p file. But then after that, we're going to start to see a little bit of Plex struggle. I don't know if you noticed that there. I exited a little quickly. Let's go back to it. And if we have a look, you'll see at the bottom, while it's playing back that file, the buffering. Now buffering, I'm going to keep the mouse on the buffering for you here. And see how close the playback is reaching that buffering. All the other ones, the buffering completed long before it reached it. But right now, buffering is only barely keeping ahead of the game there in between. So this is where we're kind of hitting that benchmark. Now this is 120 megabits per second, 4K UHD H.264. So 4K file playback here. It's still going to attempt to play the original file, but I think this is where we're going to see those difficulties. Buffering has reached 5 seconds. And we'll give it a little while longer. We can see that CPU and memory utilization is creeping up. Have a look there. And we're seeing the bandwidth spike. So it is going to attempt to play something. But for how long for, we'll have to find out in just a second. Bring that back there. It is loading the file in, but again, buffering, and it has kicked us out. So 4K, it is going to struggle. And from this point, I think we can assume that the 200 megabits and 400 megabits files are going to meet a very similar fate. As we can see, it's reaching the buffering up to here, but this is still, we're now dealing with files that are maybe a third of a gig in size. Let's have a look. So right now we're trying to play the 700, so this is 3/4 of a gigabyte, give or take. 716 megabytes there of this file being played. It's a 30-second file, and it's just not going to happen on this device. So again, let's exit there and have a look. So it was having difficulty with all of those file types. Now we're going to play that same 4K file, but this time we're going to try to transcode it down. We're going to try to move down to a 720p. Oh, actually, let's go for a 1080p version. And now we're going to flick that 4K file down to 1080p to see how the system deals with that. We're seeing the spikes in the memory and CPU utilization, but that's about it. We're seeing the buffering, but we are seeing pixelation, and it was just outweighed. So unfortunately, I would not deem that a success. And finally, let's end on that Herculean 400 megabits per second file there. And again, go straight into the conversion. There's not even a hope of it playing its original format here. It's going to try. We've at least got that picture there, and it's going to try to run the conversion. We're up to here. We're at 2 seconds of buffering, which tells you quite a lot. And it is buffering very gradually, almost a second at a time, with each second taking about 3 to 4 seconds to buffer, which means when this file plays, it's going to drastically outpace the buffering, this outrun here. So again, you can see there, CPU utilization of Plex is at 95%. And again, this tells us everything we need to know about Plex on this device. Now, Plex Media Server on this device right now will play back the majority of your files. And if you are looking at seriously high-end file formats, like some of these we've talked about here, bear in mind, this is where you need a Pentium or an Intel Core based processor, something with a little bit more than standard embedded graphics. Now, this is still something that's to do with the Plex testing, and I would play the Video Station app, but it will ruin a whole dedicated video coming soon. What I will say is Video Station on the 653D as well as the 253D and 453D wildly outweigh Plex Media Server right now, and I strongly recommend checking that out. It's got the metadata scraping, it's got all of the playback, it's got the transcoding online and offline, and with the added bonus that it's not a subscription service like Plex. So do look forward to that video when it comes. So let's end playing on a file here. Let's go for one of these files. Let's go for the 10 meg H.265 10-bit and maybe try to see if we can transcode it down. I do think we're going to be unlucky, but let's end on that one. Anyway, let's go for the automatic Plex transcoding option, which is always fun because Plex has these options built into it. But as you can see, CPU and memory utilization is going to bump along the way, and buffering is happening. But as we can see, the Plex automated transcoding, and now it's transcoded this file down to 47.7 megabits per second, so half the megabits and 1080p, but it's outweighed by the transcoding. Let's expand on this actually, because that was quite an interesting little test. There was that file earlier on, H.265 or HEVC, 10-bit file at 3 megabits per second, 1080p. This is one that was hugely struggling on this device. Let's go now for the automatic conversion, and we'll see what Plex recommends this file based on what the assets it has available, what it's going to convert it down to. So remember, 1080p, 10-bit, 3 megabits per second. Let's have a little look. It's converting it down to 14.1 megabits per second, so it's actually raised it, but still maintaining that 1080p. Buffering is at around 21 seconds. And let's look, are we going to have any playback? It doesn't look like this is going to deliver the goods right now, and Plex appears to have stalled. So again, that driver issue is definitely something that is recurrent, and we're not seeing anything there. So I hope you guys are looking forward to my Video Station video. Too many usage of the word video there made my brain hurt. And let's end once again trying to play that giant file at the end with automated conversion. Once again, do look out for my Video Station video. Do check out my other videos on the brand new 53D series from QNAP. Still one of the greatest devices in that family series that I've seen in a long time. Don't let the fact that it can't deal with this horrific file be what your big takeaway of this device is. But I will see you next time. Click like if you've enjoyed this video. Click subscribe to learn more. And I'll see you next time.